So, hello and welcome to what I think will probably be the last for this year, 2023, of my monthly lives with Ukrainian teachers of English. For obvious reasons, December's going to be a bit harder to get viewers and to persuade people to kind of join us to talk. I'm all for teachers having a bit of free time, and as we enter December, I guess it's kind of downtime for everybody. I'm going to be joined today by Olya Pavlivna, who I'm just waiting for here. I'm guessing all of you watching who are from Ukraine will know about this, but maybe people outside of Ukraine won't know that yesterday was the national memorial of the Holodomor Day. Yeah, I've seen you, Olya. I'll join you in a minute. I'll let you join in a minute. The Holodomor was the man-made genocide imposed on Ukrainians by Stalin, which starved millions of Ukrainians to death in the 1930s. And predictably, Russia marked this by deciding to launch its biggest attack on Kiev since the start of the full-scale invasion. So it's obviously a very kind of pertinent weekend to be talking to Olya, and I'm just going to accept her request to join now, and we'll get started. Thanks to everyone, by the way, for joining us. Go live. See what happens. I'm hoping the internet connection's okay, because obviously it can sometimes be erratic. Hello.
Hi there.
Yeah, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
Not bad, thanks.
Yeah. You're in Lviv at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How's Lviv been this week?
Pretty calm. Just the weather. It's getting closer and closer to winter, and not the kind of weather you enjoy.
Unless you enjoy winter, I guess.
Taking into consideration our realities, we can expect more and more attacks during winter. So, no, not enjoying winter. No.
Reading about the snowstorms in the Odessa region and how the snowstorms themselves have knocked out a whole load of power in Odessa Oblast and stuff.
Yeah, I have relatives in Odessa, actually my husband's parents, and they said that the winter is pretty severe.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I guess, wrap up warm and, hope the air defense does its job.
Yeah. We believe in them.
Thank you for joining us. I don't know if you've ever watched any of the other ones of these I've done, but I have a bunch of questions that I'll kind of usually start with, and we'll see where we go from there, and if we go off in little tangents, fine. Yeah. Okay. So could you maybe begin just by telling us a bit about yourself, where you grew up, something about your family background?
I grew up in Berdiansk. It's a very small provincial town by the Sea of Azov. It's a wonderful place. Well, it's hometown, so for sure it's a wonderful place. I've always enjoyed walking by the sea, and my daughter, the older one, of course, she really loves the sea as well. And actually, I grew up to a totally Russian-speaking environment.
Yep.
And I wasn't into politics before 2014.
Okay.
To start with, I was pretty young and, of course, not very knowledgeable about all that stuff. And yeah, when we had Maidan, the Revolution of Dignity events going on, I just had my older daughter, and I was suffering probably some kind of postpartum depression, so I wasn't really following everything. But when, I think it happened after actually Russians occupied Crimea, and yeah, I think it happened after in Donetsk region the event started. I started trying to understand what's going on, actually, who's wrong, who's right, and I must say it was quite challenging, as I was surrounded by mostly people supporting Russia rather than supporting Ukraine. And unfortunately, my hometown at the time was pretty, as we call it, separatistic. So yeah, and actually there were fears that it could have been occupied back then in 2013. Later, when I got to know some information, I realized that we were very lucky not to be occupied.
Sorry to interrupt. How far were you from the area that were occupied?
It's 1 hour drive to Mariupol from my city.
So not far at all.
Not far, yeah, not far at all. Yeah, and I gradually started kind of, I don't know, probably creating even my own opinion about everything what's going on. And I realized that actually Ukraine is closer to me mentally rather than Russia, despite I have some Russian roots and part of my family lives in Russia. And I started supporting our army. I started volunteering, making those, you know, I don't know what's the word, special nets you put over like military.
Camouflage nets.
Yeah, camouflage nets. So I took my daughter, we went to a special foundation where they did it, and we kind of helped to make them, those nets. And I cooked some homemade food and gave it to volunteers when they were going to zones of like active service to make something pleasant to soldiers. Yeah. So and actually, it was that place where I met my husband.
Okay. And so, in terms of somewhere like Berdiansk, back then being separatist, relatively pro-Russian, what would you say the roots of that were? Where did that come from, that sentiment?
I think we would need to go deeply, like in a lot of historic events, to see the roots, because that part, especially eastern, probably that bit of south, it had always been under Russian influence much more than any other part of Ukraine. And historically, it was like they kind of imposed Russian language there during Soviet Union, you know. They were eliminating everything Ukrainian there. I once wanted to find vyshyvanka, yeah, like the stuff what I'm wearing, of our region, and it's very difficult because a lot of museums, a lot of private collections, they were just destroyed, and you can't find an authentic one. Or at least it's very, very difficult, much more difficult rather than finding an authentic one from, for example, Western Ukraine.
And so when you were growing up, were you aware of the fact that you were in a kind of Russian information space? Or
No.
you didn't?
I didn't pay attention. It didn't kind of ring a bell or whatever.
Yeah, you just grow up with whatever's coming at you.
Yeah, it was just natural, you know. You grew up speaking Russian, you grew up reading books in Russian, watching Russian movies, and so on. And it took me a while to switch to Ukrainian.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you were growing up, you were also learning Ukrainian at school, or?
Yeah, and it's like a huge gratitude to my Ukrainian teacher, who was I was an ideal teacher, you know. She taught us in such a way. I'm really thankful to her that Ukrainian was never a problem for me. And when I decided to switch to using only Ukrainian in my life, I actually didn't have much of barriers of like stuff like that.
Yeah. And how and when did you first start learning English? Where was English kind of in the middle of all of this linguistic stew?
I think I was maybe 10th or 11th grade, like ready to leave school, when I realized that I want to connect my life with English in the future. So my father found a good tutor for me, and she helped me understand like what I couldn't understand at the time, because unfortunately at school we didn't have really good English. And It was at university when I got deeper into it. Plus, at university, I was reading. I was working at you call it like marriage agency.
Yes.
Yeah. So I practiced my English
Okay.
a lot. Yeah.
It's an unusual route to English competence.
Sorry.
It's an unusual route to English competence.
Yeah, but I was a student. I needed to make. I needed to make some money, and it was actually a good practice.
Yeah.
Because when you think in English for like 5-6 hours a day, it really improves your skills, I should say.
And did you go to university in Berdiansk as well? Or did you?
Yeah, pedagogical university.
Okay.
And I know that my English teacher has now joined. So, hello, Irina Viktorievna.
Oh, hello to Olya's English teacher. Thank you for your work and solidarity from another English teacher of the world. And you went to university kind of thinking that you'd go on and become a teacher, or what was the plan? Yeah.
I was planning actually to become a teacher, but I never saw myself as a school teacher, Like I never wanted to go to work at school because I think it's a huge problem with education system, and I don't really believe in it. I mean, if I need to spend a certain amount of hours like explaining something, I will. It doesn't matter how many lessons it takes, but when you teach at school, you are kind of restricted to certain program, to number of hours. You have students who don't want to learn English, and being a private tutor, I work only with those who need English and who need me.
Yeah, and so when did you first teaching, Olya?
Still at university, when I was finishing like 4th, 5th years, like 2 last years.
Okay.
I started having my first students, and also I worked for a language school, like having some groups. And just before COVID times, I started switching to online teaching gradually. So when COVID hit, it wasn't a huge problem for me because I was kind of prepared to that.
It's something that's come up again and again when I've been talking to Ukrainian teachers this year. Thank God for COVID, because in a way I'm prepared for being able to work online, being a bit more flexible, not being so dependent on being in one place. Yeah. And so you talked a little bit about how 2014 was a bit of a kind of awakening for you. And after...
Sorry, I didn't hear. Was something wrong with connection?
So after 2014, you stayed in Berdiansk?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you notice any kind of changes there? Because you're not that far from,
No, not really. And it was something that actually frustrated me, because helping volunteers, helping people who regularly went to war zones, like bringing some necessary stuff to our army, I knew how close war to Berdiansk was at that time. It's just 100 kilometers or something. It's not that far, I mean. And I just couldn't understand how people didn't see it, how kind of careless they were.
Yeah.
And I wish I saw some changes, but actually no. The town just continues living its own life.
Yeah, it's strange people are able to go through things. Human nature in many ways.
Probably, yeah. For many, it's easier to kind of close your eyes rather than to,
Yeah. And so, what were your memories then of the beginning of the full-scale invasion last February?
It wasn't. I mean, it didn't took us by surprise. Our family was preparing for that. If you can prepare to things like that. We were discussing with my husband's sister family, like my sisters-in-law, that we should probably move to Western Ukraine for a couple of weeks, maybe before full-scale invasion, to see what's going on, maybe then return. And actually, we were a bit too late. We were talking about it on Wednesday, planning for the weekend. We were planning to move the weekend, but on Thursday morning, just right next morning, like everything kind of broke out, and we had to rush to grab just a few essential things and to leave with 7 of us and the cat in a car.
And by that point, the war had already come to your region, to Berdiansk.
Yeah, Berdiansk was hit by a few missiles because we had a military unit in our town, and it was hit by a few missiles, and the whole town was woken up by a few powerful explosions at 4 or 5 in the morning, something like that.
And you decided there and then that it was time to leave?
Yeah. We knew that Berdiansk would be kind of cut. If you look at the map, you can understand that it was very easy to cut it and to block any traffic from there. So, and
is it sort of above Kherson but below Mariupol? Yeah. Okay. Sort of on that strip. Yeah. So it's, I mean, I guess what the Russians were trying to do very quickly is to take that whole coastline. Yeah. And when you first fled, how easy was that? Did you know where you were going, and how was the journey? And
we had no idea of where we were going. We were thinking about some Western region, like the closer to the border, the better. And the journey took like 3 days because the roads were packed. We sometimes had to stay in a traffic jam for a few hours with a line of car not moving at all. And it wasn't dangerous. I mean, like, we never heard any explosions while traveling or whatever, but just very, very nervous because of uncertainty, because they were just a few first days and you really didn't know what to expect next.
Yeah. And how did you end up?
Sorry again?
Yeah, sorry. How did you end up getting to somewhere safe?
We were just trying to find a place, and one of my students, she asked me if we have somewhere to stay, and said that here in Lviv there are 2 flats where we could just come and stay for a while. So decision was made, like, okay, we have somewhere to stay, so we are driving there.
Yeah. And so how soon after that did you then go back to teaching?
Pretty quickly. I think maybe after a month or something.
Okay.
A few students wrote to me that they would like to continue. Some of them who managed to live abroad wanted to continue having lessons. So yeah.
And you've been teaching all the time since then, or you've been mixing it up with other things, or?
No, I've been teaching all the time.
And how do you feel the war has affected your teaching and your students?
Like, I'm not sure the funny is the right word here, but in a funny way, you know, when we are working with some students' books or workbooks, I have to do some extra check before the lesson so that there is no word Russia in any of the texts, because students really get annoyed, and if I miss at some point some mentioning of that country, they are like blah 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 blah, like, you know, like it's something ugly, and they just don't want to say that loud.
Yeah.
And of course, frequent air raid alerts, they also affect, because sometimes when you know that it's just what the word, like there are no missiles flying, but it's just to be on a safe side. They turned on the air raid alert because something is in the air and they can probably shoot something.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens, but actually you're safe and you know that most likely and nothing will happen during this air raid alert. During such air raid alerts, I continue lessons and I don't interrupt them. But a few times I had to stop in the middle of the lesson, take my children and go to the basement. And when we were renting other place, it was a newly built a block of flats, and in basement there was internet, actually Wi-Fi.
Wow.
So sometimes I just took my laptop, so interrupted lesson for maybe like 10 minutes, which I needed to collect my daughter and to go down, and continued just working from the basement.
Wow. 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 And in the time since you left, what's happened to Berdiansk?
It's been occupied since the third day, I think. On the third day of full-scale invasion, Russian troops were already there. It's not been good. They suffer just immense pressure. There is no freedom there, and I know that there has been a few cases of sexual violence towards women. And Russians, they seek for Ukrainian supporters, and they keep them in places of illegal detention. So just acting as terrorists.
Have you been able to maintain contact with anyone you know there, or is the contact you have?
Yeah, a few people, yeah.
Yeah.
I never text them first because I never know if it's the right time, and I definitely don't want to possess any threat to them by texting.
Yeah.
But I am always happy when they kind of come in touch with me.
Yeah. And do you have any sense of how the full scale, that the invasion has impacted the people who previously had sympathies towards Russia, or who previously saw themselves part of the Russian world? Do you have any sense of how that's impacted them, or?
Yeah, definitely that gave food for thought for a lot of people, and they changed their attitudes, behavior. I know that really many people switched to Ukrainian after full-scale invasion, and I'm really proud of those people. But still, I think there are some supporters of Russia in Ukraine, because sometimes you read the news and you understand that, like, once again, police caught some, what's the word?
Like collaborators or people.
Who was providing with sensitive information to Russians and so on. Yeah.
No, it's funny. I got a message this morning thanking me for some posts yesterday and saying, I wish every Ukrainian cared about Ukraine as much as you do. And, you know, I kind of understand that there are obviously people within the country who are actively sabotaging the country and actively collaborating with the occupiers. And, you know, I guess there's also some people who benefit from the collaboration and who suddenly are more important now than they were before.
Yeah, those who were kind of, I don't know, some low level, not having any respect in the society, and suddenly they become, I don't know, head teachers at schools or having any other like civil servants position.
Yeah. And so, apart from teaching, what else have you been involved in? You said something about making the camouflage nets with your daughter and everything.
It was something I was doing in Berdiansk.
14, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and also while I was also in Berdiansk, I started like a free course for army veterans and their families, teaching them English. And I was inspired by an incredible person. He was a former Kremlin prisoner, He was an activist in Crimea, Gennady Afanasyev. He was very active in Crimea when everything was starting. So, of course, Russian imprisoned him, took him to Lefortovo, I think it's called, like some prison in Russia. But he was in some exchange program, so Ukraine managed to take him back. And when he returned, he started a free course for also veterans, but teaching them IT basics, like helping veterans find themselves in civil life after they return from the army. And being inspired by that, I decided that I can also contribute, because I wasn't very good in making camouflage nets, to be honest, but I believe I'm pretty good in teaching English. So I decided to do what I'm better at. Yeah. And unfortunately, Gennady died last year. He was killed by Russian in Lugansk region. He joined army with the first day of full-scale invasion, and I feel like real grief that Ukraine lost such a person. He was a remarkable man.
Yeah. One of lots of remarkable people who've been killed.
Yeah.
And have you been doing anything else as well outside of, well, I make it sound like you're not doing very much, but is there anything else that you wanted to sort of just talk about that you've been involved in apart from the...
I'm involved in fundraising, like this type of crowdfunding, when I write posts on my social media explaining people what like our army needs, and they donate some amount of money. So yeah, I'm involved in that because I'm not bad in storytelling, and I use that to keep my audience involved and kind of push them to donate. So of course, like the first place for me is my family, because my father, my brother, and my husband are in military, and regularly they need something. So I have fundraisings for that. But I have a few guys who are not family, but they're kind of close to me as well, who I also support in this way, helping fundraise for some necessary equipment to them. And also I work closely with organization which is called SEMA, and its branch SEMA Ukraine. It's an organization which takes care of women who suffered from sexual violence from Russian soldiers starting from 2014. And there are still a lot of women kept in places of illegal detention, unfortunately. Yeah.
And if it's not too painful a subject, could you just say something a bit more about the way in which women have been the victims of that kind of violence beyond, I mean, because it's obviously sort of like a specific targeted violence against Ukrainian women, as opposed to, fighting military targets or anything. Could you say a bit more about what's on and what the experiences have been of those people?
Like I can't talk a lot about it because it's not my story, and it's pretty difficult for those women to speak up at the very first place. But in general, mostly they are women who were who were actively supporting Ukraine, and Russians use sexual violence as just a weapon of war.
Yeah.
So like a torture.
Yeah. And there's a support network within Ukraine designed to help women like that.
It's an international organization. Actually, it was an organization called Mukwege Foundation, which was founded by Dr. Mukwege. He started from helping women in Africa who suffered sexual violence, but gradually this organization grew, and there is now a same organization, which is international one, having like branches in different countries where there were like conflict-related violence.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that.
And you said earlier that your family had sort of Russian roots in some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you still have any family or any friends in Russia at the moment?
I think they're alive, my part of the family, but I don't communicate with them in any way.
And they not made any attempt to communicate with you?
No. I know that my cousin followed me on Instagram, but never tried to reach me in any way. And probably from my posts and from my stories, you can kind of guess that I wouldn't enjoy such communication.
Yeah, and there's no former colleagues or former people you knew who've kept in touch with you?
I cut all such kind of connections back in 2015, 16. So for me, it was like a gradual process. I know that some of my colleagues, for example, were still buying some webinars or some stuff from Russian colleagues, but I decided that like it goes against my principles. So I stopped doing that like back then before full-scale invasion.
Yeah, yeah. And feel free just to say nothing in answer to this question, but I know from my own kind of following there will be Russians out there watching this, and I just wondered if there was anything in particular that you wanted to say to anyone in Russia, or if the stories that you've told already, and I realize it's a very difficult question to ask.
I don't really think that there is anything that could be told to them. Like if they still don't understand, it will probably hit them later. I do believe it will hit them later. Like, I'm sorry, but karma is a bitch. And I do believe that they will pay for everything. And
Yeah.
I personally will do everything. It's a shared responsibility, not a collective one, because I understand that there are some Russians who personally didn't do anything, but it's kind of shared one. They, as like people of the country, they are all responsible what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a hard thing for people to accept, the idea that things that you didn't choose or didn't support are still part of your collective responsibility. And I often think about it in England, where, you know, in my lifetime, we've had the Iraq War and then we had Brexit, both of which I was strongly opposed to, but still happened. And I know it's easy to feel like you've done what you could to try and oppose it, but clearly it wasn't enough. And I think it's important to kind of look back on those situations and think about what you could have done more, how you could have impacted things differently, how you could have persuaded more people, how you could have tried to change the course of what happened a bit more. And I guess that's part of taking collective responsibility or communal responsibility for stupid things your country does. You know, and living in a country where we've done some pretty stupid things, it's painful to look at that stuff. But I think you're right. It's very important to, and it's important to understand that the consequences that follow on from that.
Yeah, they just don't want to open their eyes. I don't know how to put it. I mean, I know people who were trying kind of to reach some Russians, to explain to them, like, look what like your soldiers are doing, but they were like, nah, it's not real, it's fake. And
I've had so many of those conversations in the early 6 months of the war. People choose to believe the facts or the ideas that they choose to believe in the end, and there's very little, you know, you have your propaganda, we have our propaganda.
Yeah,
you know, you can't have conversations with those people because they've already decided which reality bubble they're kind of in. And again, it's something I kind of hate having to ask, but I feel like I should. You said yourself that you've got your husband, your father and your brother all serving at the moment.
Yeah.
How are they? Do you know? Do you keep in touch? Do you hear from them much? Or
They're tired because soon it will be 2 years. 2 years for my husband and for my father, and even more for my brother because he was in regular army even before.
Okay.
Like he signed a contract in 2017, I think. Yeah, probably around that time. So for him, it's going to be like 6 years, 7.
Yeah. And do you manage to maintain contact with them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like now it's possible every day. Like every morning, and every evening I get at least a message from them, which is also good.
Yeah.
But last summer, for example, I don't know if you followed the news, we had a pretty bad situation around Lysychansk and Severodonetsk last summer, and there were fears that it could be kind of encircled, yeah. And my husband was at that place at Lysychansk at the moment, so they were very tense weeks for me, and he didn't always have a possibility to send a message, and I was pregnant at the time, which didn't help either.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty difficult time it was.
It's kind of like what's happening in Avdiivka at the moment, where encircling kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
And you made a decision yourself to stay in the country and not to Poland or Germany or the UK or anything, yeah?
Yeah, I had a few proposals to come to like Ireland, I could, to Bulgaria, to Poland, there was an option. Yeah, but I decided that I don't want to.
What made you decide, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what?
To start with, I can't imagine myself outside Ukraine. I mean, like, it's my home. Why should I leave home? Plus, I felt I can be more effective here rather than there. And I actually was, especially in the very beginning, when because of sudden growth of number of people in army, there was just not enough equipment, not enough supplies, and you had to search for everything, starting from, I don't know, clothes, right size, to plate carriers, helmets, and so on. And I was like searching that. Some things were coming from abroad, some I could find like here locally, but I was like picking it from all different places, like piling up in our flat and then sending to my men to different locations.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's a sudden kind of change of career. You suddenly find yourself running kind of wholesale import business.
Yeah. And there was time when I understood that I'm much better at understanding how thermal imagers work than some average soldier who didn't deal with them previously. Because when choosing, I had to read a huge amount of information about them, trying to understand which one is better and in which situation you should like use each type and so on. And I remember there was time when even people wrote to me asking for consultation, like which one is better to choose.
I had a weird afternoon about a year ago where, because a friend of mine wrote to me, I spent an afternoon kind of researching drones and like night goggles for snipers and things. And you know, it's like initially you just start Googling and looking at these things, and then after 2 hours I suddenly thought, wait a minute, I've spent 2 hours looking at military hardware on the, you know, am I going to end up on some sort of secret service list in the UK or someone Googling military equipment or something? And you know, in the end I didn't buy it from England, but I understand how strange it is to suddenly find that it's become normal for you to know about, you know, thermal imaging goggles or what, you know, it's
and we were buying some stuff. I don't remember what exactly it was, from Germany, and I don't know why, but like they had this issue. In order to sell that to us, they asked us to sign a paper promising that we are not going to use it for military purposes. And when I was signing it, I was like, no, definitely not. Only for hunting purposes. How could you think?
So I guess my next question would be, as a Ukrainian, how are you feeling about the support that Ukraine's getting from outside of Ukraine at the moment?
I feel that it's definitely weakening. because we are not like on the first like pages of any news stories or whatever, and people are talking about some tiredness because of the war, but people who say that they don't really understand what is war. You can't be tired when, I don't know, if a maniac is running after you. Is there any point of a time when you can just stop and say, oh, I'm tired of running. I think I'll better just take a break. No, you just run for your life. And the same is happening here. We are still fighting. We still haven't won. And there is a long, long way for us to do that. There is no time to be tired, and we still need support, and probably even bigger amount now. Because if you look at the front line, at what's going on, neither of the sides has any kind of prevalence. So it's like moving a bit here, a bit there, a bit here, a bit there, and probably nothing much is going to happen. I mean, like those huge operations as the liberation of Kherson, which was kind of something massive and really impressive, or from like Kharkiv region. So I believe that we need even more support, and at the same time, I understand that it's not something I can influence. From my side, I'm doing everything I can. This is something our politicians, our diplomats should do, explaining to the world out there why we need more support.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's also something I feel that people in my position can do, because I know that I am able to talk to at least some people within the Western information space, and that it's important for people to understand what's going on and why it's important for people in the West as well. Because I think it's easy to feel, like you said, it's easy to feel that because something's distant from you, it doesn't affect you. And for me, it's very, very clear how what's happening in Ukraine has a huge impact on what's going to happen in the world in the next 10 years. You know, if there was to be a Russian victory in Ukraine, it's very obvious to me, as someone who knows the region, the kind of catastrophic effects it would then have for the rest of Europe. And I think maybe people in the West and Western politicians also need to be more articulate about that and more persuasive about that, because I think Western Europe's got lazy, and we've had 70 years of more or less peace within our own regions and within our own countries, you know, without many stupid wars we've started in other people's countries. But we've had that, and I think people kind of get used to this sort of position of peace, and when you tell them maybe we should spend an extra 1% of our budget every year on military weapons, people get scared. And then you look at what Russia's doing, where they're just kind of doubling the spending on military weapons, and they're gearing up almost certainly, I think, once the election once the coronation of Putin happens next spring, there'll be another wave of mobilization inside Russia.
Most likely.
You know, I can't see how they can't do that, given the numbers of people they're losing. And, you know, when you understand that that's what's happening and that they're not going to stop, it's what's the plan for dealing with that, you know? How do you feel about people in the West who are calling for a peace deal and trying to persuade Ukraine to just give up part of the territory and say, you know, let Berdiansk and Lugansk and Crimea go, make a deal now?
It's very easy to talk about when it doesn't affect you in any way. But would they have the same opinion if someone, I don't know, comes to their house and is, okay, so kitchen and bedroom are now mine. So let's have peace negotiations, and according to them, the part of your territory is going to be now mine, or your wife is now going to be mine, just because I decided, just because I'm stronger. So, like, what's next if we start living by those like principles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it may seem like a stupid question, I don't know, but how are you feeling about the coming weeks and months?
Oh, it's kind of very difficult question because not I can't say not having a family, but not living a normal family life because my husband is away and soon it will be like 2 years, and I can't make any plans for the future because I have no idea when he returns and what's going to happen next, where we might settle down. So I feel I'm kind of stuck between past and the future because there is still no future for me. I don't see it. I have no idea what it's going to be like. So I call it I'm just functioning somehow, taking care of my children, working, supporting army, and so on. So I probably can't just answer this question. How I feel about coming months, I don't know. I'm living just with very, very short-term plans. Like, okay, next week I need to take my daughter to pediatrician. Like this week I need to collect funds and buy guys a few blood carriers or whatever.
And in terms of facing another winter in which, you know, as you said, the Russians are obviously going to be targeting infrastructure, going to be trying to freeze Ukrainians into submission. How are people around you feeling about that? Do you think people are better prepared this year than last year, or
I don't really know because my bubble, like which is a pretty small people who I communicate with, like everyone is my bubble is kind of prepared. At least we did everything we could. I mean, we live in a rented flat, so there is no way I can buy some stuff and I don't know, do some big works, inside flat, which is not mine. But everything which I could, I did. But still, I believe there are people who are hoping that it will happen somehow. It probably won't affect them because I know that during summer, a lot of people were just selling out all those power banks and other stuff they bought last winter when everything just started. And it's kind of strange. Like, why would you expect Russians to stop? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've made it very clear they're not going to stop until they're stopped.
Yeah, and the only thing they are good at is terrorizing civilians. They're just perfect in that. So I really don't believe that they will stop those huge attacks this winter. So that's why I'm actually grateful for every day this November, because last year they started from middle of October, I believe, and it's already the end of November, and like the biggest attack was the other day in Kiev. Yeah. Probably the first during this autumn, such a huge one.
I think the other difference is Ukraine is clearly more capable of launching attacks this year as well, because I saw overnight there were the attacks on the airports in Moscow, and that they're much more able to send drones over to start attacking Russian infrastructure, and the war starts to slowly come home, which I think is a very necessary thing to happen, because otherwise there's no consequences.
Yeah.
I think people have to start feeling that it's affecting them in some way. It's been very easy to stay in Moscow and feel like nothing's affecting you in lots of ways, I
think. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I don't want to keep you much longer, and I know that I've got some food waiting for me in the other room. I can smell it. I just wondered, Olya, if there's anything else you'd like to share with us, anything else you wanted to say to anyone who might be watching.
Probably not. I think I told everything. And it's actually a very difficult question, Do you have anything to share?
No, the big question, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I know. In which case, thank you very, very much for your time, and thank you for all the amazing work you've been doing. And yourself, and I hope everyone's okay in your family, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava. And I also want to thank you for all the work you are doing for Ukraine. It's just invaluable. And yeah, as you said, I wish more people were like you, doing the same for Ukraine as you do.
You know, as you probably know, it's very close to home for me because I spent a lot of time in Russia and spent a fair bit of time in Ukraine and in Belarus. I kind of look at it now, myself kept going to the scene, and I think I did fully understand the situation myself, and it took me, I guess, like a lot of people, it took the full-scale invasion for me to properly kind of wake up, see things much more clearly.
Yeah,
I think everything I've tried to do since then has been driven by both a conscience and a sense of guilt about being, you know, participant in all of that, realizing that I did have some kind of platform to use for some small kind of way of influencing people and reaching people, and maybe help to amp people's voices. So thank you for those voices.
Thanks for having me today.
I have one final question for you, Olya.
Yeah.
So for Christmas, which one are you doing now? Are you doing the 25th or are you doing the 7th?
Yeah, 25th.
And you've stopped the 7th completely?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So enjoy.
Yeah.
I think we got one month today, 1 month yesterday till Christmas.
Yeah.
So,
Pretty
you know,
soon.
I managed to get some Christmas vibes, and you know, yeah. Take care of yourselves and keep in touch. Yeah.
Yeah. In touch. Thanks.
After you.
Bye.